all my yarny friends. I'm Sara Sach. Welcome back to my crochet channel. Now today, of course, we are doing this or that and sometimes the other thing. But actually today we have a this or that question. I've been getting a lot of questions about how can I make the sides of my crochet not have these big holes. Showing it here, when crocheting in rows of double crochet. And so I've got 3 different options for you there. There is just, of course, 4 options is to chain 3, but chain 3 always leaves a hole. You can always chain 2, but the problem with the chain 2 is that sometimes we forget to stitch in that chain 2 because that chain 3 counts as our first stitch. If we only chain 2, our brain tells us that's not a stitch. Another option is to do what's called a stacked double crochet, which is interesting because you're actually stacking single crochets. And then the third option is what we call a linked stitch, a linked double crochet. So I'm going to give you a demo and show you those options. Now, if you have another option that you prefer, I would love to hear about it. You can always comment in that comment section underneath this video, because you know I love to read your comments. Also, I want to remind you that if you have any questions, like I said, you want answered, and maybe I didn't get to it quick enough because you need it right away, I do have a playlist. And the playlist here on YouTube is just called This or That. And if you click that little circle that has my face on it, it's over there, underneath here. It'll take you to my YouTube channel, and then you'll see some little tabs across the top. And one of them says Playlists. Click that playlist tab, and it'll bring up all my playlists, and you can find the playlist for this and that. And you might be able to find an answer to your question if I don't get to it soon enough. I do try, but sometimes I'm away for the day shopping for a yarn. Or hitting some great sales at Hobby Lobby. And so, yeah, I may not get to it quick enough for you. But always feel like you can ask a question. There are no wrong questions. There are no wrong answers. I love your opinions and your thoughts. I love to read them. And also, you don't have to agree with me. I am okay with that. Crochet is an ever-growing, ever-changing art. And we all have different ways of crocheting, just like painters have different ways of painting. All right, so I'm going to take you over to the other camera, and I'm going to show you the original way of doing a chain 3 and turn, and then I'm going to show you these 3 other ways that may help you not have that hole that sometimes shows up when you're doing rows of double crochets. All right, let's go to the other camera. So I've got 3 different yarns here just so that you can see the difference. I'm going to move those out of the way for right now, and we're going to deal with this one first. And this one is just some rows of double crochet, and you can see that when we do that chain 3 and turn, we get those holes, and we don't like those. Sometimes I don't mind. I like use them as part of the, like the pattern that I'm sort of working. And of course, that's just your typical. And I'm using all medium weight number 4 acrylic yarns, and I'm using an H-hook 5mm, just in case you don't know. All right, so a lot of times we do that chain 3. We turn, our chain 3 counts as our first stitch, so then we begin in the next stitch to stitch our double crochets across our row. But what happens is it makes too big of a gap, and that doesn't look very neat, and it also makes it hard to keep our rows nice and even. So one of the options that you can do is, instead of chaining 3, only chain 2 and then do it exactly the same. The only thing is you have to remember when you come back, I'm just going to do a few stitches. I'm going to chain 2 and turn because that's what I did here. You have to remember when you come back on that row to double crochet in that chain 2, because if you don't, you'll mess up your count. And a lot of times it throws me off when I'm working quickly or watching a movie while I'm doing it, and I'll forget to stitch in that chain 2. So, but that is one option that you can do. is just chain 2. Okay. All right, now let's grab one of these other ones. All right. So this one I did what we call stacked double crochet. And one thing that I learned as I was doing this is when you're going to do the stacked double crochet, don't chain 1. Okay? So we've got our rows. We're going to turn our work and we're going to single crochet right in that first one. And you don't want to chain 1 because if you chain 1, you'll get this little bump right here. Okay? We don't want that bump. All right, so you're going to single crochet. Then you're going to go in that second loop of your single crochet and single crochet again. And then you go to your next double crochet. And I want to show you. I'm going to do a few stitches and do another one like I did on the green one. Okay, and see how that makes a nice smooth turn there? If you chain 1, you end up with that little bit of a bump. All right, I'm going to show you one with the chain 1 so you can see the difference. There's a chain 1, I turn. Now I'm going to single crochet. I'm going to go in and single crochet to make that stacked double crochet. And see how that makes a little bump right there? And so I have learned when using this, do not do that chain 1. All right, when you get to the end of your row, just go ahead and turn and stitch a single crochet in that first stitch. And then we'll stack up another one in that second loop and you get a nice flat edge. Okay, so remember that if you use the stacked double crochet, which is actually single crochet stacked up, you'll get that bump. Now, one other thing about this stitch is if you're doing, say, a treble or triple stitch, you can do 3 single crochets. Make sure you go in that second loop and stitch your triples or trebles. They're the same thing, a triple or a treble, and you still get a nice flat edge. Just an FYI. All right, now another thing that you can do is you can do what's called a linked double crochet just for your first stitch, or if you're doing linked double crochets the whole time, that's okay too. All right, so we're going to chain 3 just like usual. We're going to turn, but instead of going ahead and stitching our double crochet, you're going to go through that second chain and then stitch your double crochet. Okay, now watch what happens. We went through there, so you got to go through there and then your double crochet. And let me do a couple more here. You're only linking that first one to the chain 3. All right, guys, sorry about that. I had a sniffle, I had to sneeze. All right, let's do another one just in case. Instead of starting that double crochet, we're going to go in that second chain, pull up a loop, then we'll go into the stitch we're going to stitch in, pull up our loop, yarn over, go through the first 2, yarn over, and go through the second 2. And that gives you a linked double crochet, and so you don't have that hole in there, all right? And so that's another option. I think it's a little clumsy. I don't really like that option that much unless I'm going to do, say, a bag or a pillow or something where I want all the double crochet stitches linked. Okay, but these are some options that you can do to avoid these big holes on the sides of your projects. All right, 3 different options. I always like to have options because we don't all crochet the same and we all don't do the same techniques. And it's fun because we're all at a different place, of course, as I always say, on our crochet journey. And one option you may like more than the other. And another, person may like it another way. And depending on what you're doing, depends on the option you want to use. If you're using the regular double crochet rows and you're making like a big lacy blanket or something, that chain 3 is not really going to matter. But if you're making a bag or a pillow or something where you want your double crochets tighter, those other options are great options. I really recommend that you try all 3 of them, see which one you like better. The stacked double crochet I really like, But you have to remember, don't chain one or you get that little bump on the edge of those rows that you do that. You don't want that little bump because then it won't be nice and even. A lot of times I really like to use just a chain 2 instead of a chain 3. Just because it puts it closer together, but I've got to remind myself when I do that chain 2, it does count as a stitch of a double crochet. All right. And so you can use, like I showed you, some of these options for a triple. For instance, the stacked, you can do 3 single crochet stacked instead of 2 to count as a triple or a treble. Things like that. So, my yarny friends, I really would love to hear your questions, your comments, your answers, your thoughts on this particular subject. What works best for you? And, because it really depends on if you're working in the round, if you're working across, back and forth, all different ways. And so it's fun to hear what other people have to say about it because you know what? We can all learn from each other. Like I said, we're all at a different place in our crochet journey. We can all learn from each other. I can learn from you, and we can learn from each other. Remember to comment with your thoughts and ideas because I love to read those comments. And I'll see you next time for another edition of this or that and sometimes the other thing. Now go practice these swatches and tell me what you think. Bye-bye now.